So welcome everyone to our course, The Path of Awakening Buddhist Center. And we are working our way through Traleg Rinpoche's book, Mind at Ease. Excellent book, I was about to say. And tonight we're covering the last of the 4 preliminaries, the last 2. Number 3 is what? It's about samsara, the unsatisfactoriness of samsara, and number 4 is about karmic bondage, karmic cause and effect, karmic bondage. So Michael is going to lead off tonight. And take it away, Michael.
I think I unmuted myself. So welcome everyone. Yes, we're going to be talking about the unsatisfactoriness of samsara. But before doing that, I just wanted to wrap up with some comments about the second reminder, impermanence, which followed from the first, precious human birth. At the very end of the section on impermanence, Traleg Rinpoche says that it's only by contemplating impermanence that we become reflective enough to recognize which things are worth pursuing and which things are not. If understood properly, the teachings on impermanence have a sobering effect, just as if one had been awoken from a dream. Our approach toward everything that we normally deal with, material property, friends, acquaintances, and family, will also be changed. Our extreme reactions toward things will lessen. So that's particularly true that contemplation of impermanence and death is particularly a sharp wake-up call, a sharp way of coming out of dream and realizing that we don't have forever, that although we have precious human birth, we have an incredible opportunity to practice and study all of the conditions that are necessary. There's no guarantee that these will last, and that it's a mistake to think that there will always be time later to practice. But actually, I think all of the preliminaries in some way, if we contemplate them properly, have this effect of being like being awoken from a dream. John will talk later about karma, and in contemplating that, we come to realize that it's a dream to think that our actions are not significant, and that in fact, when we're able to actually be present, awake, here and now, rather than being at the mercy of our habituation, our karma, that we can actually do something in the present moment. Similarly, it's a dream to think that the satisfactions, or the seeming satisfactions of samsara really afford us any real peace, any real comfort, any real lasting satisfaction. And that's really the whole point of contemplating the unsatisfactoriness of samsara. Sometimes it's called, this contemplation is called the faults of samsara. But the main idea is that when we get caught up in all of the struggles and conventional preoccupations that are involved in samsaric existence, that we can become completely distracted and sidetracked in our practice. So that, as Traleg Rinpoche says, we have to truly comprehend that the samsara condition is the source of our suffering and pain. Samsara does not afford us any real sense of comfort or security. And if we don't contemplate this to some degree, then it's very easy to get fooled or seduced by samsara, to think that various worldly pleasures and pursuits offer something that they don't. At best, this is one point in this contemplation, at best there may be some temporary satisfaction, as it says in the contemplation that we do every morning and every evening. But it's temporary, like a feast before the executioner leads you to your death. And that in fully contemplating, fully meditating on the unsatisfactoriness of samsara, what we're actually asked to do is what was involved in the Buddha's very first teaching, the truth of suffering, that essentially any samsaric action brings suffering, sometimes immediately, sometimes delayed, sometimes in a more subtle way that we might be somewhat numb to. And this is why, among other things, Traleg Rinpoche talks about the suffering of change or alternation, not getting what we want, getting what we don't want, losing what we had, as well as all pervasive suffering. That even if we do have some kind of pleasure, some kind of samsaric pursuit, that we still have to struggle to maintain it. We have to worry about losing it. That there's a constant anxiety no matter what we might experience. And ultimately, the problem is not in the things themselves, but rather in the attitudes, beliefs, and activities we engage in around those things, or the habitual mind that develops, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, and then again more fully in the section on karma. So that's why, in the contemplation that we do, I must cut desire and attachment, because it's not the things themselves that bring suffering, but the attitudes, beliefs, and activities that we engage in because of our attachment and desire. So it's not that we just, in contemplating this, conceptually do the opposite and reject the world or try to abandon every material thing, but it's more a matter of seeing things as they are. It's a matter of developing wisdom, which we'll also talk about later in this section, so that we understand what we actually experience. We come to see things in the world as they are, rather than through a veil of confusion, desire, and distortion. And Traleg Rinpoche, in this regard, points out that most of us never really pay attention to the things that bring about comfort, peace, and happiness, nor what causes the opposite of our well-being. Doesn't mean that we don't think about these things a lot, but we don't really look into their nature. We don't really appreciate, again, how at best they're temporary. As Changling Rinpoche said, that it's always happiness with an expiration date. And when the expiration date comes, it's painful. So that it's the very attachment, again, that brings the pain that comes. That we don't look at the ways in which we're habitually reactive or impulsive in how we deal with things in this world. Traleg Rinpoche says that everybody desires happiness, yet we know that everybody is unhappy on one level or another. And that despite our desire for happiness, we manage to do the opposite of what's beneficial of ourselves through not being attentive to our mental and physical behaviors. And this reminded me of that statement that, again, just in terms of conventional middle-class life, that we spend money we don't have on things we don't need to impress people we hardly know, perpetuating debt, struggle, and insecurity. And that's what happens when we get caught up in conventional samsaric pursuits. As Traleg Rinpoche says, if we don't reflect on those things and make an effort to deal with our conflicting emotions, we'll continue to be slaves to our unruly mind. And this is why meditation is so important, so that we can slow down enough to actually pay attention, to be reflective, and to actually realize the nature of things, as opposed to chasing one dream after another. Otherwise, we allow our minds to rob us of genuine satisfaction and happiness, which, as he says, is sacrificing a great deal for very little. And ultimately, this is the result of ignorance. He says it's our distorted view of subject and object, our confusion of duality, dualistic fixation, that gives rise to our conflicting emotions, which create the unwholesome and destructive behaviors that contribute to our unhappiness. So we could actually look at some of the meditations that he suggests here. I'm actually going to just read from the book. So basically, we should just settle ourselves in meditation, take a moment just to settle the mind, shamatha practice. And you can take refuge in the three jewels in order to establish all beings in Buddhahood. From my heart, I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart, I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, From my heart, I take refuge in the three jewels. And then contemplate that as long as we're trapped in cyclic existence, we'll never be free of the mental torment caused by conflicting emotions. A whole gamut of things, from an elementary physical level to a very personal mental level, can be the cause of unpleasantness and unhappiness. If even a brief experience of pain is unbearable, how much more so is the sum total of relentless samsaric suffering, all with no end in sight? Generate a sense of sadness at not having found a way out of this condition, and think, the suffering that I experience is like being trapped in a burning house, being stalked by wild animals, or put in prison by the state. I'm trapped in a very painful and unpleasant situation, and have not found a way to escape from it. The samsaric state is like being consumed by conflicting emotions that are like raging fires, with nothing to put them out. So, contemplate the nature of suffering, the nature of samsaric imprisonment. In whatever personal way we might experience that. And then contemplating further, being habituated beings who act on impulse, we never experience any prolonged periods of peace. We are in this predicament because of our lack of reflection on what is beneficial and what is harmful. Therefore, think, all sentient beings in the samsaric state are no different from me. They also are suffering, and they too want happiness. Like me, they do not understand the real causes of happiness. They end up creating more pain for themselves in their pursuit of happiness, all the while being deluded that they are doing something to improve their situation. Our behavior is like that of a moth burned through its attraction to flame, or like a wild deer that gets killed by hunters through its attraction to the sound of a flute. In the same way, sentient beings are constantly duped and deceived by the very things that increase their suffering. Contemplate that this situation is the result of failing to understand what things are helpful or beneficial and what things are harmful to our well-being. Reflect. All sentient beings behave in this manner because they are motivated by the conflicting emotions of deluded mind, excessive desire, anger, jealousy, pride. In spite of my imprisonment, I have never learned from my experiences and have become a repeat offender. So, again, the point of these contemplations is to wake us up from the dream that samsaric pursuits, our attachment to conventional worldly pursuits, will bring some kind of lasting happiness. It's not that we might not enjoy temporary satisfactions, but if we see things clearly, we won't develop the kinds of attachments and desires that cause us to be trapped in cycles of suffering. And for that reason, in the next section, Traleg Rinpoche goes through some description of mind and mental events to help us understand something of how we get caught up in the conflicting emotions that drive us to perceive things as offering something that they really don't. Perceive things as offering some kind of satisfaction, some kind of peace, some kind of contentment that's, again, at its best, temporary. So for that reason, he says we need to understand, we need to gain some understanding of the function of ordinary consciousness to see how we become stuck in confusion and perpetuate our imprisonment. And basically, the point that he's making here is that it's our mind that perceives certain things as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and as a result, pleasurable, painful, or indifferent. In other words, it's mind that projects onto things beliefs about what they are that are illusory. And for this reason, everything we experience is dependent upon the activities of our consciousness in this way. And with this, he begins some description, which he goes into more fully in the section on karma, on the 8 types of consciousness that come out of the Yogacara condition. So he begins by saying that consciousness has 3 aspects. First, the sensory, the 5 senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or bodily sensations. Secondly, the intentional aspect, which is how mind becomes conscious of the object we make contact with through the senses, which is basically the activity of the 7th and 8th consciousnesses. And then the cognitive aspect, which thinks, remembers, and reflects. Although the sensory consciousness, he says, are neutral and just apprehend something in the phenomenal world, but it's the intentional consciousness that immediately seizes on an object and sees it as this or that. And it's not so much that there's a clear picture of what the object is, but it's just a general intention in a general way, without much discrimination between the specifics. But it's a mental fixation that arises from that perception. In other words, it's a very basic sense of good, bad, or indifferent, pleasant, unpleasant, or whatever. And then it's the cognitive aspect of consciousness that's further attracted or repelled by what's cognized through our sense perceptions, because everything is individually sorted and interpreted by this aspect of mind. So the dissatisfactions of samsara are caused by the interactions and reactions of these 3 aspects of mind, because through them we seize upon individual objects, and that this gives rise to our different emotional responses, which he calls excessive desire, excessive aversion, and ignorance, or passion, aggression, and ignorance. And he points out that although these are described as different functions, that they happen almost simultaneously and in unison, and that they're present in each moment of cognition. But the fundamental point is that first there's a cognition, there's an idea of something, and then there's a mental act or mental acts in response to that cognition. So we form an idea of something. We label something as being something and see it as other, see it as something separate from ourselves in some way. And then we elaborate further on that. So and we do this in terms of passion, aggression, and ignorance, or as he says, excessive desire, excessive aversion, excessive ignorance. And excessive refers to both the intensity of the feeling, but also the distortion in how we perceive things. So that anything we see as a source of pleasure will give rise to craving, because we see it as so desirable. We attribute to it, again, qualities that it doesn't have. We see it as perfect. I need this. If I don't have this, I'm incomplete in some way. Anything we see as a source of displeasure will give rise to aversion or aggression. This thing is terrible. This person has no redeeming qualities. It's a complete negative. And over time, what he says is that over time, our tendency to interpret things in this way conditions the mind to see some things as painful and some things as pleasurable, and that these become entrenched or habituated in such a way so that we associate this with pain and pleasure. And this habituation, this process, is what brings about the karmic seeds that are laid in our stream of consciousness through our interactions in the world. The critical thing is that this fundamental duality of mind and object gives rise to a sense of self and other that becomes increasingly solid or seemingly real. And from that, we engage in physical, mental, and verbal actions. In other words, actions of body, speech, and mind that reflect this habituated point of view, this habituated interpretation. So it's this combination of mind and mental events, or the discriminations and conflicting emotions, that causes the dissatisfactions of samsara. And he goes on to say this is not how enlightened beings see the world, as enlightened beings apprehend things immediately, not in the dualistic fashion just described, that they operate from a mode of true compassion because they no longer distinguish between self and other, but simply respond to the needs of others with the intention to alleviate suffering. But again, it's this process of developing increasingly solid ideas about what things are and what we are. And solidified ideas involving, again, passion, aggression, and ignorance that ultimately leads to the dissatisfactions of samsara. And with this, he begins talking about how we have to overcome samsara fixations, and talks about, in this section, he actually talks about the 6 realms, which we've talked about before: the hell realm, hungry ghost realm, animal realm, human realm, jealous God realm, and God realm. But the main point of this section is that there's pain and suffering in every realm. Each realm is fraught with suffering. In particular, the lower realms, with the intensity of aggression, anger, fear, and pain in the hell realm, the intensity of unrelenting hunger and need in the hungry ghost realm, and the ignorance, the inability to relate to the world in any other way than through blind habit in the animal realm, in particular, bring intense suffering. But even in the God realm, where there is great pleasure for a period of time, that it's not permanent. At some point, it's said that in the God realm, gods die, and that there's nothing more painful than a god about to die, because they realize what they're losing, and they see their future, their ability to see that they haven't overcome cyclic existence, and that future births could, in fact, be quite painful. And even if we just think of the realms as psychological rather than taking them to be actual states of existence, tremendous pain in hell realm states that people get into, tremendous pain in hungry ghost realm states of mind that people get into, where they're tormented by endless neediness, endless sense of poverty, endless sense of lacking, and so on and so forth. But again, what he says is the real cause of samsara lies not in our failure to engage, ultimately is in our inability to generate wisdom and our inability to see through, the illusory nature of the beliefs we have about the nature of samsara, which is why contemplation of the faults of samsara is so important, so that we're able to let go, so that we're able to cut desire and attachment. And in talking about compassion, he says that the real cause of samsara lies not in our failure to engage in wholesome actions, which we'll talk about in the section on karma, but the failure to generate wisdom. That we need to generate wisdom, for wisdom is what cuts through to the heart of our existential condition. And that this wisdom will only arise if we realize that the things we take to be real and substantial are not real and substantial at all. In other words, we need to wake up from the dream. All of our negative habits and distorted views come from failing to understand how things really are and fixating instead on how they appear. Or fixating on how we wish things were, fixating on how we hope things are, rather than seeing things as they really are. It's only by realizing the nature of mind and the nature of things that the nature of things that we reverse the downward trend into samsaric existence. So basically what he's talking about here ultimately is the realization of shunyata, the empty nature of things. It's because we take things to be real in a way that they're not, that we get caught up in the conflicting emotions, passion, aggression, and ignorance. And it's only because we think that we ourselves are real in a way that we're not, that we think we can actually hold on to these things, or that they'll give us any kind of permanent and lasting satisfaction. So when we actually realize the nature of mind, we realize that mind itself doesn't have any graspable, true, fundamental nature that we can hold on to. And that therefore everything that we experience through mind equally doesn't have any kind of real solid nature that we can grasp onto. And with this, we come to a realization of a direct perception of the luminous, spontaneously arisen wisdom that he says is perspicacious or clear in nature. A direct perception of the luminous, spontaneously arisen wisdom that is perspicacious or clear in nature. and that this wisdom manifests in an unceasing manner, completely free of dualistic notions of subject and object, and that it's in particular our failure to recognize this self-luminous state that leads us into the entanglements and the dualistic fixations that create our samsaric sufferings. And as long as these delusions persist, our samsaric sufferings will continue incessantly. This is why generating wisdom, generating clarity, generating enough stability so that we can see things as they are rather than how they appear, rather than how we wish they were, is so important. And that's why in the end he says it's therefore imperative that we grasp the nature of things to be devoid of inherent existence and realize that there is no self-existing object that is ultimately real. So that ultimately that's what leads to freedom from samsara. That's what leads to the ability to, as we say in the reminder, the preliminary reminder, to cut desire and attachment. So with that, I'll turn it over to John to talk about the final preliminary, karma.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Let's start with a meditation. And this time, I mean, what he's calling meditations here in these chapters are really more like contemplations because they're conceptual. But we're going to do an actual meditation. So take a good posture. It's really important always to have a good posture just because it helps you with your mind. Eyes open, gaze at the horizontal probably, or wherever you like to put it. Probably either at the horizontal or down. And bring your awareness right here into this present moment, this space. No thoughts needed. And if you do have thoughts, they're part of the present moment, this space. And you just relax. Relax here into this time and place. This space and your awareness are one. Simple, effortless. Any effort becomes a distraction. And so you let all effort go and just be here, however you are, with whatever happens to be arising and presenting itself. This voice, these words, whatever you're gazing at, what's ever coming in through your eyes. Now that I mention it, the feeling of your body and the seat that you have, thoughts coming and going. And you just rest here in this space. Thoughts will arise and then they pass. But this space of awareness is always here. And we rest, relax back into it. Thoughts come up and take us away momentarily. Those moments can go into minutes and even hours. But then they disappear. They're dreams. They come and they go. And when they're gone, you can hardly even remember that they were here, that particular thought or dream. And the space of awareness goes on and on. Here's a joke. You can relax now because this is complete relaxation. has no point other than to relax into this awareness. The awareness is effortless, aware of anything and everything that presents itself. So I'm going to go on and talk about karmic cause and effect. It's a matter of what we're giving our loyalty to. As Trungpa Rinpoche said, and I keep repeating, we're switching our allegiance, our loyalty, from the stories that we tell ourselves in thought to this open, clear awareness that is a constant. The contents of this awareness, thoughts, physical sensations, visual objects, sounds, all of that come and go. But the awareness is always here. And we're switching our loyalty from the dreams of our thoughts and emotions. They're always stories. To this. This is the path. This is our practice. This is the practice of becoming sane. Because when we give our loyalty to the stories that we tell ourselves, we become more or less insane. We become driven by dreams. It's so interesting to contemplate that the dreams that we have, oh, I don't like that person, they were mean to me. Oh, I like this other person, they're very nice to me. All of these dreams, they have such a short life, and then they're gone. They evaporate into space. While they're happening, we think they define us. I am the person who is liked by so-and-so and disliked by so-and-so. I am the person who likes to eat chocolate but doesn't like to eat rhubarb, whatever it might be. And we define ourselves by these thoughts of likes and dislikes. Those are the three poisons: liking, disliking, and then being neutral, neither liking nor disliking. When we're driven by these thoughts, when they animate us, we become more or less crazy. And I think especially those of you who live in New York, you've seen people who are really crazy, walking down the streets, talking, maybe even screaming to themselves, or on the subway, behaving utterly inappropriately. They're living the dream, whatever that dream may be, and it's not a good dream. And they're acting it out, they're being driven by it. Whereas saner people can let the dreams go and just come back to this clear awareness in the present, even if it's not happening very often. But for meditators, it's happening more and more often, that we recognize it. It's always there. It's always happening for everybody. It's a matter of whether we recognize it and give our loyalty to it and behave and act in consonance with what is happening in this clear awareness now, what is right in front of us, in front of our noses, here, sensually. And we respond to it with clarity, that's wisdom, and with heart, that's compassion. That's the sanity. So he talks about karmic cause and effect because it binds us. It enslaves us to the dreams. Why as long? How long? As long as we are there. It's just as long as it's happening. Eventually, all dreams end. Maybe they only last an instant. Sometimes they last minutes. Sometimes they last hours. Sometimes they last years. And those are the realms of the dreams that go on and for years. I mean, they leave and then they come back because they've got a momentum. They can't be continuous, but they have the ability to peter out and then revive. So, for instance, I think of the Wall Street trader who wants to be a billionaire and is driven by the feeling of poverty, like they don't have enough money, and of envy for the people who've really got it made, who have the billions, and they are struggling. This is a jealous God. And they are consumed by the dream. Now, not all the time. Sometimes they're sitting on the toilet having a shit. Sometimes they're eating a meal. Sometimes they're talking with a friend, a lover. But that dream of the becoming a billionaire is so dominant, it comes back over and over again and conditions the way in which this person lives and how they behave in many, many ways, in social situations, at work, all over the place. And they're driven by that obsession. Or the person that you see walking down the street. There was that person who was killed on a subway the other day, the person who was a sometime Michael Jackson imitator. I read about him in the New York Times. And he was just behaving crazy on a subway. And some person who had training in the Marines put him in a chokehold and strangled him to death, and is not being prosecuted because the person was behaving in such a frightening way. It can get you in a lot of trouble, being obsessed that way with the dream. And this is what karmic cause and effect is about. The karma is being lost in these dreams. And when we are lost in these dreams, we live out the stories. That's where karma lives, in these stories, the karmic cause and effects. In all the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives. I'm worried about money. I don't have enough love. I'm too fat. I love this painting that I saw on the wall. I wish I could own it. Whatever it might be. And for a while, we're lost in that story. And it always is driven by one of these three poisons, they're called, of aversion. If you don't like it, if it's inimical to your well-being, you want to push it away. And passion, if this is something that's going to augment your well-being, your existence, you want to pull it to you, maybe even consume it, eat it, become one with it, screw it, whatever you're going to do. And if it's neither of those, then you're indifferent. And this is the third passion, which is usually translated, and I feel always incorrectly, as ignorance. Ignorance should be saved for avidya, the fundamental ignorance of non-enlightenment. The word here is moha, and it really means indifference, that one is neither drawn to it nor repelled by it. So, in order to understand both suffering and temporary happiness, he says, we need to understand karmic cause and effect. This is what I'm talking about, the dream. Every individual carries his or her personal history of karmic predispositions. We've learned that person who reminds us of somebody who was really mean to me when I was a little child, and he reminds me of that person, and I don't like that person, this person here that's here now, because I know that they're going to be mean to me like that person that I knew when I was a child. These are karmic predispositions. They're planted in our alaya vijnana. That's the storehouse consciousness, as memories. And when those memories are triggered, they come to life and make us see whatever is happening in front of us in a distorted way, through the lens of past experience, through the lens of that memory. These are called karmic predispositions, tendencies, imprints. They are seeds. The term in Sanskrit is bijas. And the bijas, the seeds of what? Seeds of passion, aggression, and indifference, of klesha, of karmic distress. These seeds lie in what Freud called the unconscious or the subconscious. And in Buddhism we call it the alaya, the storehouse consciousness, the alaya vijnana. They're there waiting to be triggered by events or by just coming into life by themselves. Sometimes they do that. You'll be sitting and having having lunch, and suddenly you remember something, and it comes out of the alaya, and colors your experience. So every individual carries his or her personal history of karmic predispositions, tendencies. We're living in a dream world. Even the idea of me and what I feel about my face as I grow old and the saggy and this, all of that is karmic predisposition. It's karmic. It's the memories that are stored in the Alaya Vijnana. Whoever thought we would be old and dying, and then the fear of death? So these things don't happen by chance, but they're contingent on karmic causes and conditions in our mind streams. We're carried along by our karma, like the force of a waterfall. And he says it's the ultimate tyrant. The ultimate tyrant, because when you walk down the street, wherever you are, as you're sitting now, as you're listening to this, these karmic predispositions will arise and color the way you feel about whatever it is you're experiencing. And so he talks about now the 8 levels of consciousness, of which I've already been talking about the Alaya Vijnana, the storehouse where all these seeds of liking, disliking, karmic predisposition are stored. Of the other 7, 5 are the sense objects, seeing, sound, smell, taste, touch. Taste, touch, yep. And then the 6th is mind itself, seeing mental events. So these are 5 organs, you might say. The eyes see visual objects, the ears hear sounds. The mind sees mental events of all kinds. And the mind also has another function. It coordinates the senses. So it looks at the objects of the eye, the objects of the ear, the objects of the nose, and it coordinates them into a complete picture, the one you're having now. That's what the mano-vijnana, mind consciousness, does. Now, those are the first 6. And then the 7th consciousness is called the defiled consciousness, or the defiling consciousness, the Klishto mano-vijnana in Sanskrit. And this is the one that is perhaps a little more complicated or to understand. It's called the afflicted consciousness, translated, the 7th one, which sees the other 6 through the lenses of the 3 poisons. So it sees a sight and it says, I like that sight. Or it hears a sound and says, ooh, that's a terrible sound. It's seeing or experiencing the objects of the first 6, that thought, ooh, terrible thought I just had, ooh, and it's judging them in terms of the 3 poisons. This is the 7th, the afflicted consciousness. And it also looks back at the Alaya and has this vague feeling that this unconscious, this big bag of stuff back there, of memories, is fundamentally me. That's what the Klishto, the 7th consciousness, does. So this is a description of how we live in the world. We have all this data coming in through the 5 senses and also the data of mind which coordinates the 5 senses and also has its thoughts. And then we have the push-pull of like, dislike, and indifference. And finally, we have all these memories which lie dormant until they're triggered and they come into being in our daily life. You walk down the street, you see somebody who reminds you of someone you like, and you feel attracted to them. Or at night, you have a dream full of all kinds of likes and dislikes. That's the Alaya kicking out all kinds of memories and bringing them into a semi-consciousness of a dream state. And this is what we're driven by. And the cure for this, you might say, or our task, is to let go and come back into this clarity of the present moment, which we just practiced. We are shifting loyalty from all of those push-pulls, likes, dislikes, dreams, stories that we tell ourselves. And those stories, it's not a big deal to shift your loyalty away from them. They only last a minute or two, and then do you even remember you had it? It's gone. It's like a diaphanous nothing that passes, like a television show that you watched and you got all involved in and maybe had emotions with, and then it's over and it's gone. And you go and you see your friends and you have dinner and you don't even think about it. And maybe you do think about it, but not for very long, because it was just a dream. And that's just like the dreams that we have in our minds. And the most fundamental dream is the dream of me, of I, of me and my well-being, me and my problems, me and my suffering. It's one we come back to over and over again. And we come back to it, we have thoughts about it, and then those thoughts vanish just like all others. And we come back to this. This is what's constant. This here and now. So he says the Alaya Vijnana, cannot be used as the basis for liberation of the mind at all. Why? Because it's full of dream, false, memories, stories. That's all they are, stories, dreams, stories. It has to be transformed from the unconscious container of our delusory states to a spacious, boundless awareness that is fully conscious and depleted of all its hidden elements. How do we do that? How do we translate this big bag that we've got back there, full of all of these memories and predispositions and prejudices that we've carried around in our minds and likes and dislikes? How do we transform that from the unconscious container to what is called the Alaya, not the Alaya Vijnana? It's just the pure awareness. And how we do it is by becoming conscious of the contents of that bag, of becoming aware. So when we have a thought, instead of just acting it out mentally or physically, we say, oh yeah, look at that. And we see it and we let it go, just like we are meant to do in meditation. And by bringing it to awareness, you undercut it. You begin to burn it up. This is described, Thich Nhat Hanh describes this beautifully in his book. I always forget the title of this book. Maybe somebody will remember and put it in chat. Something about our mind. And how you burn up the contents of the Alaya, these habitual predispositions. How? By bringing them to awareness, by seeing them, by not, instead of dreaming them and getting lost in the dreams, by seeing it, saying, oh yeah, I'm having a thought, and letting it go and coming back to this awareness here and now, here, right now. And you're looking at your screen. And when you do that, then you begin to dissolve the Alaya. The Alaya is like a bag. The Alaya Vijnana is like a bag that holds all of these seeds, but it doesn't really have any existence. It only is there when the seeds are there. And when the seeds disappear, the Alaya is gone too. It just dissolves. And then we're left here in pure awareness. And this is what we're meant to do, to be here in pure awareness. It's a very different life. We're not driven by all of our prejudices, likes, dislikes, predispositions. And when we begin to reside in this open space of awareness, it's called wisdom. The term in Sanskrit is yeshe, which means primordial knowing. Primordial, it's not a big deal. It just means that it's always been here. It has always been here. Period. It's like we're not responsible for it. It's just here. Yeshe. Yeah is primordial. It's always been here. She is knowing, because that's its very nature, knowingness. And he talks about how our minds can condition us, and the 10 unwholesome and the 10 wholesome actions, and the 10 unwholesome actions that habituate us to unwholesomeness, which means ego, which means thinking about me a lot, are killing. The physical ones are killing, stealing, and having improper sex acts, whatever that might be. The 4 unwholesome verbal actions: lying with intention to deceive, slander in order to cause friction, idle gossip, and harsh words. And the 3 unwholesome mental acts, which are covetousness, harboring harmful thoughts towards others, and wrong views. Wrong views are all kinds of things, like believing in God from a Buddhist perspective is a wrong view. Hate to tell you. And believing in self is a wrong view. And then the wholesome ones are the opposite. So when it comes to the physical actions, instead of killing, saving life. Instead of stealing, practicing generosity. These are wholesome actions. And in terms of having improper sex, whatever that may be, we have to figure that one out. Proper sexual relations, and so on. With the, I have difficulty figuring out what. I'd like to have somebody tell me what the reverse of the unwholesome speech and mind actions are. And he says the experiences of pleasure and rebirth into elevated states are produced by wholesome karma. So this is very temporary. This is a relative virtue. It's not enlightenment. It's not fundamental. It's that it's sort of like you do something good and you get a reward. So if you do wholesome acts, you wind up getting rewards of all kinds. And if you do unwholesome acts, you get negative effects. And this is to be understood because, you know, you would really like to get the wholesome acts, have the wholesome acts and get positive effects for 2 reasons. One is it's more pleasurable, but the other one is that it's more, it creates a situation in which you can then more easily come into awareness, which is the real treading of this path, of coming back into this clear, open awareness in the present moment. He says, it is essential to engage in the 2 accumulations of merit and wisdom. Merit is doing kind acts and not doing unwholesome things. If we wish to secure ultimate freedom and enlightenment, he says the accumulation of merit relates to the development of compassion. When we commit these wholesome acts, we begin to resonate and have heart feelings for other sentient beings to a greater extent. This arises from wholesome actions. The accumulation of wisdom, which comes from meditating, relates to realizing the nature of mind and arises from engaging in the practices of tranquility and insight meditation, which we're doing every day. Because when we do that, we begin to let go of our preconceptions, let go of our ideas, and come back into just clear awareness. So really what he's talking about, he says, these accumulations will purify the 2-fold obscurations of the mind, known as the 2 veils. This is the veil of conflicting emotions, which you have all these conflicting emotions happening, and the veil of cognitive distortions, which really means that you believe in I and other. And when you meditate, you are cutting both of these veils. How? You're coming back to clear awareness. I and other are thoughts. There's other, here am I. But when you just rest in awareness, it's irrelevant, though that thought. I and other is just an add-on. Instead, there's this, whatever it might be. And the I and other go. And this is really what's meant by shunyata. Shunyata means the absence of I and other. How do you achieve that absence? By simply coming present, by resting in this world of the 5 senses. You cut those 2 veils, the veil of wrong beliefs about reality. That's what it's sometimes called. He's calling it cognitive distortions. And it's wrong beliefs. The wrong beliefs are the belief that I and other exist. And whenever you come back into just simple awareness and let the thoughts go, that's gone. It just evaporates. It's not that you realize something, it's that's an afterthought. But the experience of it is just immediate, and there doesn't have any words. And then the veil, which pierces conflicting emotions, is just that, again, you come back into this present moment, and there's no I, other conflict. Instead, there's an appreciation, a feeling of heart, of warmth, of maybe even love. And they talk about that when one comes back into this space here that we're practicing in, it's luminous. What does luminous mean? It means it's glowing with the red of this sweater, with the sound of these words, with the taste that's in your mouth after you drink a glass of lemon water. That's the luminosity. It's vividness, the vividness of the sense perceptions when you are not lost in dreams. When you're lost in dream, like, oh, what am I going to do about paying the rent? Oh, that person said something mean to me. Oh, and you might not even notice where you are because we're so lost in dreams. As soon as we cut through those dreams, we come back. This world is luminous. It's live. It's bright. And that luminosity can become very intense and very beautiful in moments. So let's try a meditation. We start by taking a good posture. This is coming back to awareness. And we take refuge with our minds. I take refuge in the Buddha as the example. I take refuge in the Dharma as these instructions. And I take refuge in the Sangha as my community of friends and fellow travelers on this path. And I wish all beings bodhicitta, awakened mind, including me. And this is what we're practicing, awakened mind, coming back from dream to now. And he says, while we remain unenlightened and so in samsara, that means just lost in dreams, we are continually engaged in planting and reaping the fruits of karmic seeds, our karma, getting even with somebody, or enjoying the fruits of our generosity to somebody, all kinds of things. We should try to abandon unwholesome actions with body, speech, and mind, and the causes and conditions that allow unwholesome seeds to flourish. Why? Because they produce unhappiness and because they impede our path. They involve us in struggle instead of relaxing into this awareness. We should try to engage exclusively in activities that will lead us to liberation. That means the 10 wholesome actions. Contemplate the benefits of performing wholesome actions in terms of your temporal and ultimate goals. So think about the 10 wholesome actions of saving life, practicing generosity, proper sexual relations, good speech, not being kind with your speech, not being deceptive or lying, not trying to cause friction, but instead promoting harmony with your speech, and with mind that you are generous and wish benefit for others, and you are just clear and open. You don't harbor prejudices and wrong views and ideologies. So we perform the wholesome actions, and we vow, from this day forth, I will endeavor to save lives, practice generosity toward others, and conduct myself in sexually moral ways. I will always tell the truth and refrain from negative talk or gossip about others. I will cultivate benevolence, compassionate thoughts, and the correct view, whatever that you understand that to be. And then we meditate. And here we are. So he talks about karma and dependent origination. Dependent origination just means that there's no substance to this. Everything is appearing as part of a picture that's continually disappearing and changing. And so he says, although karma appears real, it has no intrinsic reality. It is not real, inevitable. It does bring us have pleasure and pain, but these are insubstantial. They just pass. They're dream experiences. In fact, the very notion of I is just another dream experience. What's real is this. Whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're seeing. He says we can't say that karma does or doesn't exist really, because nothing exists really. Everything is just this dream, this constant passing. It doesn't last even an instant. It's just a shifting, a motion through the air. He says it does bring merit on a relative level. So if you do good acts, you get something back. As long as we believe in I and other, but when we stop believing in I and other, there is no good or bad karma. He says, just as our dreams have no reality but still affect us while we're dreaming, just so with karma. Karma is just another dream. It's the dream of what's happening between I and other, me and my dinner, me and my friend, me and my enemy, me and my lover, me and my boss, whatever it might be. As long as karmic traces and dispositions remain, as long as these dreams, as long as we believe in them and they keep coming back, the alaya will function, the alaya, the storehouse, as a kind of unconscious subterfuge to our being. We think it's me, all those memories back there. When the dream is removed, the basic consciousness, the alaya, will also dissipate into transparent clarity and luminous bliss. It just dissolves. And it's just, then all that's here is here, with all of this vividly arising. The basic consciousness will gradually be fundamentally transformed through tranquility and insight meditation. This is what is so essential, that we do shamatha vipassana. It's the coming back. Even if in a course of an hour you only come back for 5 minutes, you've come back. Right now, you come back just to this image, to the room we're in, whatever it might be. When all traces of defilements and obscurations vanish, those are the habits, the full manifestation of enlightenment will emerge. He says, so we need to engage in the accumulation of wisdom and merit. Again, merit is just doing good things. So we're kind to others because it brings ease to us and it helps our appreciation of the beauty of the world. And wisdom means that we come back from dreams into this clear awareness in the present moment. He says only this will allow us to eliminate the effects of karma on the relative level. That means pleasure and pain as a result of our thoughts, and enable us to gain insight into the nature of ultimate reality. Then the meditation. We'll do one more meditation. See how we're doing in time. 6:40, getting late. So we contemplate the benefits of creating merit and developing more amiable, healthful habits beneficial to our spiritual growth. Then we think about the need to go beyond all habits and develop a spontaneous disposition whereby our behavior is automatically wholesome and beneficial. And that only happens when we come back into this clear present awareness now. This is attained through the accumulation of wisdom, saying the same thing. The accumulation of wisdom means we come back from all kinds of thoughts into this awareness that's right here, awareness of whatever is going on. He says, reflect. I will engage in skillful methods of compassionate activity to accumulate merit, and I will practice tranquility and insight meditation, that's shamatha and vipassana, to accumulate wisdom. In this way, I will aspire to become an elevated being who spontaneously acts for the benefit of beings, myself and others, oneself and others. One spontaneously acts because, why? Because you've developed this love of others through the practice of compassion and merit, and because you have come back into the present moment, this luminous presence, and appreciate it in contrast to dreams. So let's just do that for a minute. Take a good posture. In my case, take off your glasses. Bring your awareness here into this room, this present space, which is so luminously vivid and here, full of color and sight, and the sound of, in my case, my voice. Feeling of your bottom on the seat. And you just rest here in simple awareness. Nothing to do. Rest. Inaction. Thoughts might come and go. No worries. They just do. Meanwhile, this space of awareness persists. It never ends, really. Thoughts come into it, depart, and we rest. Okay. You can do these on your own too. So there's just a little more. Because while we remain in the conditioned state of existence that's confused, we can still accumulate virtues and aim toward the liberation of nirvana enlightenment. How? By coming back, by practicing shamatha and vipassana, and by practicing generosity and kindness to others. He says, we ourselves are responsible for what happens. There is no external agent to be held responsible for our experiences. It's just each one of us. The point of karmic theory, this idea of karma, which has always to do with reward and punishment for our actions, is to encourage us to behave in a way that is beneficial to others and to ourselves. That's the whole point about thinking about this. And how do we behave in a way that's beneficial to others and ourselves? Through the practice of generosity and kindness. That's on the relative level. And on the absolute level, coming back to this pure awareness. Those two practices, relative and absolute awakened mind, bodhicitta. By living in a wholesome way and encouraging others to do similarly, and so hopefully creating a more wholesome world. And we awaken, by doing this, we awaken from the dream. Yeah. Normally, we and others behave as though we might live forever, devoting our time to trivialities. Some people do this. Others are victims of their raging neuroses and lack any peace of mind, like that poor fellow who was strangled on the subway. And there are others filled with rage and so on through the realms. You see what the realms are pictures of the dreams, the different styles of dreams. I already gave you a picture of the jealous god realm, a Wall Street trader wanting to be a billionaire. The god is dreaming. Everything they see is pleasure. Everything they drink is ambrosia. Everything they eat is wonderful food. Everything they make love with a glance. Everything is beautiful. This is the thoughts of the gods. These are the habitual patterns. This is the karma, the stories that the gods are living in. And it colors both their view of themselves and their view of the world around them. The hell beings, they see themselves as utterly endangered, surrounded by danger, surrounded by threat, surrounded by nastiness and horror and anger. And they feel anger in themselves and they see it around them. And danger, physical threat, physical and mental. And this is all dream. It's conjured up in the mind. It's a dream. And the animal realms, they see the world as just something to eat and be rooted through like a pig, or smelled and licked like a dog. And this is the dream of the animal realm. And these dreams make us stupid and unhappy. It says, many pursue neurotic behaviors vigorously, and we've seen them and motivated. They're in the realms. The realms are these dream states, you see, and the realms can take physical shape. You know, you've got a dream of being physically beautiful, so you go to the beauty parlor. You have, maybe you have plastic surgery done. You buy new clothes. You can actually translate a dream into physical reality. All kinds of, in many different ways. And others who suffer intensely through various mental and physical torments, and they still do not fundamentally address their suffering or question it because they're trying to act out the dream. Others have I won't bother with that. So the meditation, really, take a posture, and it's to contemplate the importance of not squandering your precious time. Give rise to the aspiration to achieve enlightenment. That's awakening. Forget about enlightenment. It's too glorious a word. It's simply coming present and shifting your loyalty totally to this and realizing that this is what's real and the rest is dream. For your own and others' benefit. That's the key. Generate compassion for all beings by rousing the intention to bring all to the state of real sanity. So we could just contemplate that for a minute. Of coming to sanity for ourselves, our benefit, and for others' benefits, helping them to come to sanity too, out of dreaming. Okay. Let's see, there's a little bit more. He says, these teachings are very important. And while they are, we should remember that they are just preliminaries, whose purpose is to motivate us to practice. That's these contemplations, these thoughts about karma and dreaming. Their whole sole purpose of studying this and talking about this is to motivate us to get our butts down on the cushion to practice. If we're doing nundra, to do that, to do whatever your practice might be. That's the point of these contemplating these preliminaries. And they simply help us to see the relevance and urgency of spiritual practice. Urgency, why? Because we can dream our lives away. And in fact, many of us have dreamt the portion of a big portion of our lives away and are continuing. Finally, because unless we become spiritually conscious in this way, we remain in a state of denial about our lives. We will just go about our business without being aware of what is really going on. And what is really going on is that we're marching towards Armageddon, towards death. Yet Buddhism is not pessimistic, he says. It simply states how things are. It constantly says that all these sufferings can be overcome. The heart of Buddhism is practice. And we've been doing it here, coming back to this clear awareness. And this consists of ways to lessen both our own suffering and the pain and suffering of others. Shifting our allegiance from all these dreams. And isn't it amazing that all this thought about me and who I am and where I'm going and what I'm worrying about, it's all a dream that goes away in a finger snap whenever we come present. And then it rises up again because it's got this momentum to it, which is called karma, the karmic momentum. So we can have a discussion. We've got a little bit of time, and then we'll do it again tomorrow. Mary, you want to switch us to gallery view? Or maybe you have already.
Yes, I took the spotlight off.
Thank you.
Xinyi?
Hi. I have two questions about karma. So the first question relates to a talk that I recently heard from Tenzin Palmo, and she also did a talk that focused on karma. And one point she made is that purification practices like Vajrasattva mantras help clear away major obstacles and a big part of the bad karma, but it doesn't exactly clean it up completely. I don't know if you've heard of this, and I guess your opinion on that.
Michael, do you have anything?
I'm not sure about this, but at one point in the in the chapter that we read, he talks about different bases of purification, and that one element of purification is letting go of all of the things that obscure our our awareness of our true nature. And sort of like what he talks when he talks about like burning up all of the things in the Alaya Vijnana, but that the real basis for purification is actually awareness of Rigpa, or awareness of the true state of mind. So I think that Vajrasattva mantra is based on clearing away the obscurations, and it's more of a path-oriented way of getting at purification, but that the real purification comes from realizing the true nature of mind. That's my guess.
And when you do Vajrasattva mantra practice, you always start out with, what's called Sampanna Krama, or in Tibetan, Tsogrim, perfection stage. And that is doing what we've been talking about, it's resting in pure awareness. And then you, at the end of the Vajrasattva mantra practice, you come back and you practice Sampanna Krama again of rest. You dissolve the visualization back into pure awareness, here and now. In the middle, you're doing a kind of relative practice. It's a relative, like the practice of generosity. Only here what you're doing is you're imagining the purity of Vajrasattva washing out all of the karmic habits of good and bad out of your body. And there's so there's the absolute at the beginning and the end, and there's the relative in the middle.
What was your other question?
Okay, my second question.
Hopefully we answered that one well enough.
Yeah, I'll ponder on that. So my second question is, can you attain enlightenment without exhausting karma? Yeah, that's my second.
Enlightenment is the exhaustion of karma. In other words, the only way that you actually get free of karma is by becoming enlightened. But what does enlightened mean? it really means what Trungpa Rinpoche said, and I keep quoting him over and over again, of completely shifting your loyalty from the dreams to this awareness in the present moment, here now. And when you do that, there is no karma.
But I guess
Karma.
you could still be experiencing the result of past karma while being enlightened. I'm thinking of the Buddha, like having some illness sometimes, and he would say, this is like in the past, I did this or something.
Yes, I mean, the Buddha did, he lived another, 60 some odd years, I'll tell you in total, and he eventually died, and that was the result of previous karma. So karma plays out physically as well as mentally. But he was enlightened while it was happening. Michael, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's the same thing. But yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. The only way, you see, what happens is when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he stopped making any future karma, any further karma, that was going to have any implications for his life. But he still had to live out the past karma, which was having a human body, right? And having to eat and eventually die. That's the story.
Mark had his hand raised. I don't know if he still.
Yes, yeah, I had it raised, but I think it pretty much. I just isn't the very notion of karma samsaric in nature.
Yes.
So,
yes.
That's
karma is the dreams. It's the mechanism that drives our dreams. All our dreams are about pleasure and pain and indifference and the emotions, envy, jealousy, pride, hatred. These are all the stuff of karma. And that's where it lives.
Thank you.
It's the working of those things. It's how they produce causes and effects.
Thank you, John.
And it's so interesting that we can step out of it at any moment just by coming back into this clear present awareness for however long.
So one more thing that I wanted to share was I was thinking about all that's in this chapter about mind and mental events and the 8 levels of consciousness. And I think some of the details of that might be really fascinating or confusing. But I think the main point is that more than we're aware, we construct the world that we live in. And it's not something we do in a deliberate way, like putting together a household budget, although there might be some deliberation. But the whole point is that a lot of it is, because we're not aware, it's unconscious, it's habituated. And that this is why meditation practice is so important, that we engage in shamatha and come back. We become able to disengage and just see. And then with Vipassana, we're able to actually see that it's a construction, that doesn't have the reality that we ordinarily have because we identify so much with it. And I think that's really the point of all of the detail about the 8 levels of consciousness and mind and mental events. It's just coming to see through how we construct the world and come to see that it's actually transparent. It's not real.
So unless there's a burning question, there's a story about that, we should probably end with the chants. Anybody? Who's putting them up? I can't put them up. I'm sorry. I put them up before, I think. But my computer died again.
Okay. And so we'll close by reciting a prayer for peace and dedicating the merit generated through our practice and study for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, May wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the radiant wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, John and Michael and Sue and everyone.